Welcome to episode 87 of the Breaking Balls podcast. It's post-Iowa edition. Adam, happy Father's Day. It's the first time you're celebrating. It's the first time the Cup Series is at Iowa. Ryan Blaney and Victory Lane, somehow those moms always win again.
That's a good-looking fella driving the 12 car, Bob. But back on NBC this week, which means I didn't get to see my first commercial till lap 25. Everyone rejoice. And Kyle Larson and Daniel Suarez did a cha-cha. Let's break it down.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking Balls podcast, post-Iowa edition. Adam and I are here to recap all the stuff. We're going to try not to make any corn-related jokes here because I think that's been beaten to death this week, Ad. So by all means, the floor is yours. If you do any corn jokes, that's 25 cents in the jar.
All right. Well, I'm a little corn-fused as to what to say now, but Ryan Blaney is your winner. If you're new here, please like, comment, subscribe. I'll say this. I thought two things going into this race, Bob. One of them was that we were going to get a lot of tire wear. The other one was that I thought Kyle Busch had a chance to win. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong on both accounts. But nevertheless, we are here.
I might double charge you for that corn pun just because your takes were so off about this week. I told you, just, hey, let's see what it looks like. We've got some practice this week, full practice. The tires blew up in practice. Everyone was worried. Brad Keselowski came out on Twitter Saturday before the race, said, I think we might actually have a good race. Might be an unpopular opinion. You know, you can call what you want, but Ad, I really came away from this weekend thinking it was a success at Iowa. I really, more than anything, it felt like a true old school NASCAR race, that intermediate oval, and you had long green flag runs. You had a little bit of tire wear towards the end of those cycles there. You had a couple of guys that were comers and goers for the lead. There was just a lot of storylines. Plus, you know, we said it and we'll talk about it later, but we actually had a race broadcast that told us exactly what was going on, when it was going on, and why it was going on.
100%. The camera angles. But yeah, you know, Bob, I was highly skeptical this entire week, to be honest with you, because first, you know, it started kind of coming out that, okay, well, NASCAR did a half repave, which I had no idea what to even make of that statement.
It didn't look good on TV, by the way.
Oh, God, no, it did not. It literally looked like a freeway out here in LA. It reminded me of what they do to fix the 101 freeway. It did not look good. I can only imagine how uncomfortable it was to drive on, because at 65 miles an hour on the freeway, that's uncomfortable. I can only imagine at 110. But, you know, there was the weird repave, and then, of course, the stuff started creeping out about the tires and what was going to happen. And no, Bob, I couldn't agree with your take more. We ended up getting, on Father's Day of all things, we got your father's NASCAR race. A lot of green flag runs, some strategy. New tires did end up mattering, like you said. But yeah, it certainly wasn't heaven, but it was Iowa. I am very excited. I considering the negative feelings I had going into this race, I am pleasantly surprised as we record this podcast of the variety of racing that we got. It was a very interesting day.
It was, because there's a whole bunch of different storylines to come away from this. Obviously, let's start from our victory lane and work our way back here. You've got Ryan Blaney, who gets his first win of the year. Honestly, it kind of feels like Ryan Blaney's already been locked into the playoffs. It was weird. I had to go back and think, oh yeah, he hasn't won a race, because he did have a decent start to the season before a lull in the spring. But yet Ryan Blaney gets his Gateway Demons expunged there, and he's in victory lane here at Iowa. You have him a career best 201 laps led. Also, a thing that kind of jumped out to me, Ad, was that's his career best. It felt like he had a race or two in his career past where he led something like that, but no, this was Ryan Blaney's first ever dominant race out there.
It was very weird, because even this race, because he did, by all, you know, out of a 350 lap race, if you're, you know, leading 207, you could feel dominant, but it still didn't quite feel dominant because of what happened to Kyle Larson, which we'll get into later. But I think you're right. The sentiment is 100%. I thought Ryan Blaney had won a race, even though I know he didn't. When you objectively, because every week we look at the standings, you could see he didn't have a win, but it certainly did feel like it. This was one of those instances to where he may not have completely deserved to win today, but he did deserve a win, period. And like you said, after what happened to Gateway, I was hopeful he would get this win, and sure enough, comes out, leads 207 laps, and bang, in the playoffs. So good for Ryan Blaney, good for Ford, good for Penske as a whole. it just seems like hopefully this snowballs momentum for the team, but we'll have to wait and see.
In all honesty, this race did feel more like Gateway. It felt like a Gateway Part 2 with Iowa here, where the race flow and just the way the racing was, you had a lot of chaotic restarts and then green flag runs where you strung out and race position mattered there. Some race strategy where some cautions happened that kind of mixed the field up there at the end of stage 2 and towards stage 3 ad. But the big thing for me, besides Ryan Blaney actually getting that win, was coming into today. Ryan Blaney had only had one stage win, so he only had one playoff point coming into today. He leaves here getting 6 points out of this, so he's got 7 now, jumps his way up, toward the mid-tier of the grid for the playoff standings, and is top 10 now in the regular season's standings. So for Ryan Blaney, comes out of this weekend thinking we finally got something. And also for everyone saying if you build it, they will come. This is Ryan Blaney now winning at the Truck Series, Xfinity, and Cup Series, the first person to ever hit the Grand Slam at Iowa. And the entire family was there. All 80 Blaneys were out there coming out of the cornfields in droves for him.
That was really cool. I think, anytime that you see a driver have that much support at a race, we saw it with Hemric at Martinsville. I think in years past, I think it was when Daniel Suarez won at Sonoma. It's always cool to see a driver win when they have a real contingent of fans there, especially when it's family like Ryan Blaney's was today. It just adds a layer of a story that, I thought NBC, we'll talk about it later, but they did a very good job of covering all of it. Just a really good day to be Ryan Blaney today, Bob.
I like how you put it earlier here. Let's kind of retrace our steps here, Ad. You called this your Father's Day NASCAR race. What did you call it there? I want to get it right.
It was your father's classic NASCAR race. I mean, this was your father's race. It was long green flag runs. It was the drive. It wasn't. It feels like NASCAR gets the rap of being a little bit gimmicky ever since they added the stage breaks. You get a lot of people, I don't watch the sport anymore because it's not racing. This very much felt like just because of the way the race was broken up. I think the length of the track kind of played into it, and the weird repave, to be honest with you, because you never really knew what was going to happen with the tires. It just felt like it had that old school feel to where they were just going to keep driving. We're going to stay green for a really long time. And I think that's when NASCAR is at its most entertaining, when it's in the driver's hands as opposed to being in the pit crew or, whoever's on the flag stand or whoever's in race control. This is the type of race that NASCAR needs more of, especially on a short track. We've had a lot of issues with the short track package, a lot of, what are we going to do? And I think the coolest thing about this for me is that the fans have been clamoring for an Iowa Cup race for a very long time. And even though NASCAR kind of did it reluctantly, they gave the fans what they wanted. And this race put on a heck of a show. And that's why I said it was your father's NASCAR race, because it reminded me, of 15, 20 years ago when you would turn on the TV every Sunday. You would have no idea what you were going to see, but you knew that you were going to be entertained. And Iowa felt that way to me today. I had no idea what to expect when I turned the TV on because it was such a new track. Nobody knew what was going on with the tires. But at the end of the day, I'm walking away from the race and I was highly entertained by what I saw.
The two things that jump away for me action-wise in this race are, and I'm always for green flag pit stops. I'm a proponent for it. It makes the racing better because it incorporates the full team. I always say that on this podcast, Dad. I'll stand by it. But you had, at the end of stage 2, that green flag pit cycle that got mired toward the end there with that Hemric yellow, which we'll get into. But you had that green flag pit cycle there where about 100 or so laps in, you had those tires starting to give. And you had multiple guys blow tires, whether they got close to the wall or completely shredded their tire, or went off the pace, whatever. You had multiple different tire failures later into that green flag cycle, closer to that pit cycle. Love seeing just those guys on the edge and when's this next car going to go? Okay, these guys are playing chicken with the leader. Who's going to be the first one to blink as the leader in pit? That was great. And then also, toward the end of stage 3 ad, you saw William Byron chasing down Ryan Blaney. Yeah, everyone's talked about this new pavement at Iowa, this half pave. Ryan Blaney, credit to him and his car, he was the only guy that really could make the bottom work. And you really noticed that, I think, in the lap traffic in stage 3. When you had William Byron cutting that lead to about a second, 1.2, got it down to maybe half a second at times when, Bubba Wallace, Ty Gibbs, some of those guys that are closer to the mid-pack are getting lapped. Ryan Blaney was able to work the bottom, and William Byron wasn't. And I think that was the notable thing there for me was watching these guys do these longer green flag cycles in stage 3 solve their car problems, because you had Chase Elliott's crew chief Alan Gustafson saying, hey, give us a little bit on the first few laps, save a little bit, it's going to come back to you. And you saw Chase Elliott right there toward the end, right on William Byron's heels for a few laps. I love seeing these drivers when it's in their actual hands. That's the big thing.
And I'm glad you mentioned the, Alex Gustafson and Chase Elliott's interaction there, hey, save a little bit, because it just goes to show you how quickly, this was the very first Cup race, full practice session, so you did get a little bit of data, but it is so impressive to me how quickly these teams, because of how much of the SMT data they have and stuff to look at during the races, the way that they are able to almost adjust in the matter of minutes, it seems like, to basically just be like, okay, hey, this is where the speed is, go ahead and do this, 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 and this. I think that is one of the most, partially because I don't have an engineering background and don't necessarily understand it, that is one of those things to me. For them to be able to be so spot on with the changes that they were making in the middle of a competition, it's mind-blowing to me. It's one of those things that no matter how many times I see it week to week, no matter how many times you see an adjustment that really pays off, it's one of those things that it's almost second nature, that you just expect cars to adjust and get better throughout the day. But I don't think we sometimes appreciate how difficult that is, to basically say, look, maybe the plan we had coming in here wasn't the best and we need to scrap it and change right now. And I think that was one of those rare instances where, you kind of peek behind the curtain, you see it. And yeah, it really stuck out in my mind. It is so impressive to see how quickly they are able to change strategy, make a change, or do different things to really improve their chances of winning the race.
One of the other things that we were kind of talking about, as far as this being an interesting race to look at, from it wasn't action packed necessarily as far as on track action, but there's a lot to break down. Where you did have the action was the restarts, and that's typical NASCAR racing, obviously, but especially at a track like this, where if you're going to get ground, this is the moment to do it, is off these restarts. And you had it a couple times, but really the big note one here is stage 3. I think it was lap 280, I believe we had written down, but it was the Denny Hamlin, Daniel Suarez, and Kyle Larson incident. And obviously Kyle Larson was the guy we briefly glossed over at the beginning, but he led 80 laps today, wins stage 2, went all the way to the back of the field at the beginning of stage 2 and worked his way back up to win that stage. Was really the guy to beat, I think, all day. And then I guess he and Suarez got into it. It really looked more like a racing incident. But go ahead. What happened there? What was going on with Suarez and Larson?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, a racing incident for sure. That's a way to look at it. You have to be aggressive on restarts, especially in the next gen era. We've seen it a million times. It's a tale as old as time at this point. So Kyle Larson just kind of, season opening. I think this is one of the things he does better than just about anybody in the field. When Kyle Larson sees an opening, he goes. He doesn't think about it, doesn't even consider it. He just sees a little bit of daylight and takes it. And sure enough, a little bit of daylight opened up between, I think it was Daniel Suarez and Denny, right? Denny Hamlin at that point? Or
was Denny. It was Denny right there. Brad Keselowski was right there. It was a whole gaggle of cars there. I'm not exactly sure how it shook out, but regardless, you're on the spot. I know Suarez was on his inside.
Yeah, so obviously, Kyle Larson takes the space, and Daniel Suarez gets a little bit loose, gets into Larson. Larson gets into Hamlin, and sure enough, yeah, it's a racing incident. But here's what I'll say: you just got done talking about it. Kyle Larson had already gone to the back of the field because he thought he had a tire issue, felt like he was going to pop, decided to play it safe and go to pit road, get it changed out. Turned out, after they looked at the tire and everything, didn't have an issue. But he went all the way from the back of the field and was able to drive his way through and, get himself that second, that win in stage 2. It almost felt like I was scratching my head a little bit, because I was like, it just didn't seem like it is the same thing that we were mad at Ricky Stenhouse for doing to Kyle Busch in the All-Star race. It's just that this was a points race and it's Kyle Larson. And I think, is it a racing incident? Yeah. But do I think that Kyle Larson needs to necessarily force the issue right then and there? No. It was very clear that he had the best car in the field. I think anytime you go to the back and drive through everybody the way that he did, it's pretty clear you've got a car to get a really good finish. It just didn't. The risk wasn't worth the reward right in that instance, in my opinion. That being said, I totally understand how and why this happened because it's Kyle Larson. That's just how he races. He is, almost his reputation is such that he's going to try and put other people in bad decisions and make them make a worse decision. And it seemed like obviously he forced the issue here, and this time it didn't work out. Is it a racing issue? Yeah. Do I think Kyle Larson needed to force the issue? Probably not in this instance.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of onto it. I'll exaggerate a little bit more where you left off there with he makes people put themselves in bad decisions. But you're saying Kyle Larson needs to wait it out and wait for that gap because he's got the faster car. Kyle Larson's one of the most aggressive drivers in the field there. And that's his stance where I'm either going to win the race or I'm going to wreck going for the win. And you've seen it multiple times last year and this year. I mean, that's part of the reason why he had issues last year and didn't win the championship. Everyone called it a slump, but no, it was really Kyle Larson just wrecked out going for wins in multiple races and completely pointed himself out. This year, Kyle Larson's got all these stage points and even won stage 2 tonight, so comes away with results even on top of a DNF. And that's the biggest difference, I think, this year for Kyle Larson is he's able to stack those stage points up to where these DNFs don't matter. But that's Kyle Larson's nature at the end of the day is, yeah, he's probably got the fastest car and should be patient and wait out this stage. But Kyle Larson doesn't become Kyle Larson by waiting it out. Kyle Larson's an aggressive driver and goes from the very second. That's when he's at his best, is when he can pin his ears back and be full 100% go. Otherwise, you're hampering a talent at that point. But I do get what you're saying.
No, and you're right. I think at the end of the day, you would so much rather have your driver be too aggressive as opposed to, why would you put a muzzle on a guard dog? It doesn't make a ton of sense. And that's kind of, you don't want Kyle Larson to not drive aggressively. I think, part of what, like you said, part of what makes him great is that ability to just constantly be going for the win, constantly be putting guys in weird predicaments in order to make them make bad decisions. That's just the way he's got to do things. And ultimately, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, at the end of the day, guys like Chastain, whether you like him or not, he's a pain to race around, and nobody's going to go around him easily. And it shows at the end of the day, he gets as much results out of the car as he can. And I think that's, Kyle Larson's that to an umph degree with the wins and the championship pedigree.
Exactly. And I think when you win as much as Kyle Larson does, you obviously get the reputation as a winner, to where I think Ross Chastain is just kind of in that not quite there yet. He's not up in that echelon to where he's winning consistently enough to where no matter what he does, he's just consistently considered to be a winner. And, that's just the difference. And ultimately, we wouldn't have that reputation of Kyle Larson if these types of moves didn't work out as consistently as they do. So, every now and again, you're going to have something like this happen. If you go boom or bust, you're not going to win every time. Eventually you're going to bust. And it just seemed like today, that's kind of what happened, went over 21, hit the bust.
That is spinning the Kyle Larson racing wheel of destiny. He used up all of his luck in Knoxville, I guess. But there wasn't a ton of incidents on track. Obviously, that was the main one to start stage 3 to open that one up. We'll get into a couple of these. You had the Spire accordion early. You had Noah Gragson with a crazy save on John Hunter Nemechek's torpedo missile there. And I think it was lap 81 there. But the one that jumps out to me, and we can touch on the other ones here too, but was that Daniel Hemric yellow in stage 2 that really did split up some of the cycles of pit road. Really trapped some of the guys a lap down when Ricky Stenhouse stayed out and really threw a wrench into everyone's plans there. But I'm very curious because we kind of did briefly touch on this one pre-show. You'd think that was an okay caution, huh? Go ahead, explain yourself, sir. It's Father's Day. Have a day.
Okay, what I said was is that at least NASCAR was mildly consistent. I'm gonna make a real defense attorney argument. It seemed like the delineation that they had made was if you pop a tire and don't hit the wall, they weren't going to throw the yellow. If you popped a tire and hit the wall, they would throw the yellow. I guess my co-host did point out to me that, Adam, there was guys who hit the wall after popping the tires and they didn't throw the yellow. And I guess my response to that would be they obviously didn't hit the wall hard enough that NASCAR thought it should be a yellow, Bob. So you know what? At this point, it is the beauty of being the judge, jury, and executioner of your own NASCAR, of your own series, like NASCAR is that you get to make these types of decisions however the hell you want. And I guess I tried to put my understanding glasses on and say, you know what, I think I get this one, but
And just go ahead and explain that to Adam, or to Christopher Bell and Adam Stevens as crew chief, because that whole radio, I guess you could call it rant. It was not pleasant to hear because they were very frustrated at race control there. Yeah,
rightfully so. It's one of those things where it could not have happened at a worse time for the 20.
That's the thing. That's the thing, Ed. It was literally, you had all these guys finally, it was, like we said earlier, it was a game of chicken where you're waiting out who's going to be the first guy to pit. And you finally had some of the Hemric cars pit, and you had William Byron actually cycle out to the lead there, but finally you had Christopher Bell and some of those guys pit. But otherwise, Brad Keselowski and some of those guys that really waited out 1 or 2 more laps, boom. There's that caution that comes out for Hemric where he does split the tire, and yes, it is a safety hazard. I'm not disagreeing with you there 100%, but just for what had happened earlier, there were multiple guys. The Ross Chastain one where he could barely keep it on the track there. The tire looked like it was going to come off. Eric Jones leaped back onto turn 3 for a second there, pulled it back down, but there was a lot of incidents there where you could have thrown the yellow, but it was in the middle of the pit cycle, so they didn't want to create that incident. And so I guess my question is just, at what point, why was the Hemric one there? But listen, we're not in race control, so we're never going to know. We're never going to know.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that it's like, unless you are fly in the wall in race control, whatever room that is, whatever situation room that they've got, whatever the setup is, whoever's got that button who's deciding whether or not to throw the caution, I don't know. And that's the thing. I tried to put a little bit of consistency to it and say maybe it was the whole hitting the wall, but that was dead wrong. So at this point, nobody really ever knows what a caution is going to be. So we just need to kind of, as soon as you see an on-track incident, if it benefits your favorite driver, pray that you see the yellow flag. If not, pray that you don't. And that's, at this point, 50-50. You could be right or wrong depending on what week it is. Nobody really even knows.
Really is kind of throwing the dice out and see what you land on with, is it a caution or not? But we did mention the Spire accordion that happened lap 3 or lap 4. And you had Corey LaJoie on the radio. He found out that I think they said the 77 got into the 71. He goes, of course. But really, let's transition to the results here, because Corey LaJoie ended up in 21st, while Carson Hocevar battled for 14th. And is really kind of showing the pecking order of Spire, if you ask me. But today felt like a day where some of the usual suspects in the Cup, the Larsons, the Hamlins, the Truexes, really didn't show out today. And yes, they got the stage wins or the stage points. They didn't get the overall points. And you had some of the more underdogs or guys on the cut line really having a day today. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think, if Corey LaJoie is stacking pennies, Carson Hocevar stacking dimes at this point. I mean, that just seems to be what's happening at Spire. But yeah, I think especially the first time you go to a track, there's a reason I thought Kyle Busch had a chance to win today. I'm just going to keep reminding people of how bad that take was, but I thought Kyle Busch was going to win today.
And it wasn't a bad take though, because he did have speed. They said on the broadcast, it's the 3rd week in a row where you had speed. You were not off.
No, I knew better. I think you and I both know I knew better. I should have known better. I shouldn't have said it. Even if I thought it, I should have never put it in a text message. That was the dumbest thing I could have done. But, especially first time going to a track, I just thought, you expect the old guard to just figure it out because they've been doing this for so long. Guys like you said, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, Kyle Busch in my instance. It seemed like it was going to be, their kind of elder statesman-like experience that would really carry the day. But ultimately, you kind of forget that just because the Cup hadn't been here, Xfinity and trucks have. And there was a lot of young guys, including Carson Hocevar, who had raced here before and had a ton of experience. And really, even with the repave and, all of the question marks going into it, you still saw guys who you probably didn't necessarily expect having really good days at this track just because they had been here before.
I'm so glad you said that. That's a great point about the Xfinity and Truck Series run there before, because, yeah, the pit cycle had it to where Ricky Stenhouse cycled out luckily with the strategy there, but he held his track position and ended up in fifth place today. And yeah, he's got Brad Doherty on the broadcast finally watching over him, so he's got a lot of pressure, but delivers finally today in a year where Stenhouse has really taken a step back, leading the Cup Series in pit road penalties, and just feels like that 47 team is just not quite where they were in 2023. So a great day for them. And really the one that jumps out to me is Josh Berry. Like you said, Xfinity experience. He's already a short track novice. That's what he's known for. And, to go out there and lead laps and show really good speed, it really was the only SHR car that was really, really competitive today, because you had Gragson get mired. Ryan Preece, who was a winner at this track, really didn't show up. And Chase Briscoe had qualifying speed, but otherwise was a non-factor. Josh Berry, the pride of Hendersonville, Tennessee, really looked good today.
It is a weird thing to say out loud, but this is probably the best 7th place finish that anybody will have all year. And it comes up Josh Berry, because as much as yeah, okay, he's at the bottom half of the top 10, it just does not tell the story of his day. This was probably the most at home Josh Berry has looked in the NASCAR Next Gen, the Next Gen car since he's been in this seat. And especially with all of the uncertainty that's around SHR, nobody really knows what the future holds for Josh Berry, where he's going to be driving, that type of deal. It was just such a good day. And it just shows that, like you said, it almost reminded you why he was in the seat in the first place. And like you said, it was that ability to run short tracks and to really just to be able to put together really good finishes at tracks like this. And it was a very impressive day. I think he deserved better than 7th place, but at the end of the day, I think he'll take it.
This almost feels like the Dover race last year, where he finished second filling for Chase Elliott. And that really was kind of the race that cemented his spot in this 4 car this year. And I'm curious, as a free agency perspective, Josh Berry obviously is one of the guys at SHR that is looking for a ride next year. And you look at it from 2 different perspectives. Everyone's always looking at it from the sponsorship perspective. What does these guys bring? Okay, Briscoe's got Mahindra, Gragson's got Bass Pro, all these guys. But Josh Berry's got something that brings to the table that's very different than everyone else. Not only does he have that short track experience and that background, but he's got Rodney Childers on his side, and he brings Rodney Childers to a team if he gets signed somewhere. And I think that is such an invaluable part of this free agency process that not a lot of people are talking about. One of the greatest minds in the NASCAR Cup Series garage, to have him as part of your package deal in free agency, to have a result like this for Josh Berry plus Childers in your side, I'm not really seeing why more teams aren't looking at Josh Berry for future seats.
I agree with you 100%. If they're a package deal, you have to very seriously consider it, just because you have to believe that as that tandem, of Rodney Childers and Josh Berry continues to kind of grow together, especially, I think as we've it's been revealed in the past few weeks, not necessarily the most, we'll call it the most conducive environment for success at SHR as of late. Not a lot of support from ownership, it sounds like. Not a lot of support, period, to be dead honest with you. So it just seems like if they find the right situation, it just feels like you've got a driver that, especially Dale Jr. is incredibly high on. And a lot of kind of the old guard looks at Josh Berry and says, hey, this guy can drive. And then obviously we know what Rodney Childers could do because we saw the first half of his career that he had with Kevin Harvick. So you're right. I think it's one of those things that even without sponsorship, even without that guaranteed big name sponsor, if you are looking for a driver and crew chief combo in the offseason, you very seriously have to look at Josh Berry and Rodney Childers.
100% agreed. I think that's a fascinating little wrinkle to add into the silly season there. But you're looking at kind of the other results here, Trackhouse had a very strong day. Suarez looked like he was in the top 10 most of the day. Chastain even overcoming that tire issue, getting 11th there. And like we said earlier, a lot of the more unusual suspects, but Todd Gilliland, 12th place, now 20th in the point series, in the point standings. Just might start needing to give a little bit of respect to Todd Gilliland in that 38 team, And one more guy that it seems like at this point it's literally every single week, but 13th place and was running top 10 on raw speed all day. Justin Haley, that 51 Rick Ware racing car. That's another guy to watch at silly season next year, because I guess it's a 1-in-1 year deal where maybe he has a team option next year. But if a bigger team like I really don't even know who could be calling at this point. Maybe the Wood brothers, maybe RFK if there's an open seat. It really just depends on these charters. But Justin Haley's an underrated name in the free agency cycle this year that really deserves a better seat.
100%. You saw a very interesting tweet come from the Couch Racer account. You know, the guys at DBC obviously have their brand. And they said apparently you got to look for a car that ends with a 1, which would obviously be that Wood Brothers seat if if you can't connect the dots. It would be interesting, but I think you're 100% right. My question is whose wife did Justin Haley sleep with at both Fox and NBC that we can't get them to mention him a single time on the broadcast? These are my questions. Because you're running consistently in the top 10 all day. I get it. We don't, we're used to not talking about Rick Ware Racing, but guess what? He's shown up this year, and it's been consistent enough that it's time to start talking about it. And I don't know if I have to write letters. I don't know what I have to do, but it's starting to we need to start putting a little bit of respect on that 51 car, and especially Justin Haley, because he's been absolutely wheeling that car all year.
Agreed. We are a Justin Haley podcast here at Breaking Ball. We are on record. We even put a video out about, I think it was April, saying Justin Haley needs more respect in this Rick Ware car. So listen, we have been on the wave here, folks. But before we get into our new points leader in the Cup Series, which that's what we call a teaser in the business, let's first do one more look back here at I've got. Let me double check where they were at here because I lost my train of thought here. Oh, here it is. 4th place, Christopher Bell. I believe it was 4th place.
Yep,
yes, 4th place. 4th place, Christopher Bell. We've talked now half an hour on this podcast. Not a single Toyota, really. Not a single Toyota has been mentioned on this podcast. Now, I know Gateway is kind of the exception with Hemric. Is Iowa maybe the exception with Toyota? I don't know, but whether it was Joe Gibbs or the 2311 cars, Legacy is always really not a factor, but none of those cars really looked like they had speed except for Christopher Bell, who was mired in track position all race.
Yeah, you 100% hit the nail on the head. I mean, I don't know. For whatever reason, it seems like there's tracks in NASCAR that, just don't work out for manufacturers, like you said. And for whatever reason, yeah, Christopher Bell, obviously, and his day even went worse. Obviously, we talked about it earlier. His day got a little bit messed up, and he still ended up getting a finish. But yeah, you have to go down pretty far. I mean, shoot, where is the next Toyota in the finishing order here? I believe I think it's either Martin Truex Jr. Let me look real quick. Yeah, it's Martin Truex Jr. in 15th.
Yeah, Truex, yeah.
Yeah, it's Truex in 15th. Yep. That's nuts. And especially considering, it's not like they have, they're dealing with a lot of guys who haven't had a good year. But I'll say this, I had a very conscious thought in the middle of this race of what the heck's going on at 2311? Because usually you see Tyler Reddick show up, especially at a track like this, to where, you're going to have to search for grip and there's going to be, you're going to need to kind of move around the track. You usually expect Tyler Reddick to show up at tracks like this, and he just hasn't. Bubba Wallace, I'm about to change his name to Bubble Wallace because he just stays on the bubble and just kind of rides this weird line all year. And then on top of that, I loved the idea of the Grimace car. That being said, he just looked like he was driving actually Grimace out there because it just looked like a purple blob. There was no real shape or anything to the art and you had to really zoom in to see it. It was kind of weird, but I think you're 100% right to say it just wasn't the Toyota's day. And I would say, I'm not going to waste my breath being overly critical of Legacy, but I will say 2311, you kind of have to, it's put up or shut up time. We've got 9 races left. Both of those guys need to figure it out. Obviously, Tyler Reddick's locked in, but it just seems like Bubba Wallace really needs to kind of figure things out a little bit if he wants to race his way in.
Yeah, it seems like their track position is not where it was last year, and I'm not sure why that is. If it's just the way that strategy is shaken out, or if it's just they don't have the speed quite right now. But compared to Joe Gibbs Racing and the dominance they've had, it just seems like they're not quite there at. I will say this real quick before I send it back to you. For the folks at the McDonald's Corp, send Grimace to Adam's house. I have nothing to do with this slander. I think that he's beautiful. He is proper, the body image of an angel, and I think that we should celebrate Grimace every day of the year. Anyways, back to Adam, the slanderous Grimace man.
Okay, I do not want this to be a fat on fat crime. Okay, I was not
fat.
saying
It's power.
I am not
Grimace is an entity.
I understand Grimace is an entity, but what I'm
You
saying
going after the
is
Catholic Church next?
no, I've already been doing that. Anyway, no, it's just one of those things. If you're gonna put the king on your car, make him noticeable, and it just didn't seem noticeable to me. But the other interesting story, a little side note, not anything we put on the show sheet, but shout out to Denny Hamlin, who very clearly thinks so highly of Martin Truex Jr. to the fact where as soon as he was told about his retirement, he basically said, "Hey man, we're gonna have your car ready for you for the Daytona 500. You can drive it whenever you want." It was really cool. I don't know. There was something about that interview that felt very cool because as much as it sucks to lose Martin Truex Jr. at the end of the year, it kind of feels like you're losing a little bit of, your childhood. It's one of those names that has always been around the sport. But just to hear Denny Hamlin be like, "Oh no, we're not going to let him go too far." It was something about that really kind of warmed my heart a little bit, Bob. I'm excited to know that if Martin wants to run a Cup race, he's got a place to do it.
I do like that all the veterans kind of stick together there. That's cool to see the old guard come together and say, "Hey, we gotta support each other. We gotta lift ourselves up as kings here." So that's cool to see the Toyota guys sticking together there. Before we put a bow on this weekend here, and first of all, if you're new to Breaking Balls, and if you've made it this far, like and subscribe our podcast. It helps a ton. We're just growing shortly, one day at a time here, folks, but we're doing it our own way here. But let's go ahead and look at the big results, the big picture here in the NASCAR standings, because NBC has definitely let us know that there is a playoff picture coming up. And with that, we have a new regular season points leader, and the playoff cut line has changed just a little bit. It's gotten a little bit tighter with just another win now. 10 winners now, 9 races to go, and Chase Elliott is your new regular season points leader. 7 top 5s in his last 11 races. For all the talk we had at the beginning of this year of Chase Elliott in this next-gen car doesn't get along, that 9 team is dialed in right now. And are the wins coming and the laps really being led? No. But listen, he's getting results and he's getting finishing results. And that's really what matters at the end of the day.
This is the most Chase Elliott way to be leading in points. It's just so quiet, so understated. Of course, the only people who are going to really let you know about this are all the Chase Elliott fans. And believe me, there is a contingency of them, as we all know. It's the sport's most popular driver. But yeah, it's been quiet. It has been anything but flashy. It's just kind of been consistent. And, I think you've seen it in the NBA with Kawhi Leonard. You'll hear it all over. The board man gets paid. And it just seems like that's what's happening here with Chase Elliott. It's not spectacular. It is not flashy. But my, oh my, is it consistent. You have to respect the consistency because obviously everybody else is looking up at him. Even if you haven't really had to see the back of his bumper at the front of a race or anything like that, he's finding a way to piece together the performances in such a way that everybody's got to look up at the standings towards him. So you got to tip your cap to him.
And like I said a minute ago, 7 top 5s in the last 11 races. And what is in those 11 races at? It's a variety of tracks, road courses, short tracks, intermediates, super speedways, a little bit of everything. So when the playoff time comes around, that's what matters is can you win on different circuits, especially with the way the playoffs have really shaken out the last few years and the way the schedule is.
Yeah.
Now I will say this, Chase Elliott is the playoff leader, right? Or the regular season leader. And with that, if you win the regular season championship, you get those extra playoff points. Kyle Larson's in second right now. And, for all the talk about, well, he got the waiver granted. Should he get the waiver? Should he won't? Really, you could look at the punishment of the Coke 600. If he misses that Coke 600, that could be the difference in the regular season championship. That's 25 playoff points. This is a massive difference. Kyle Larson's already suffered enough, if you ask me, because this could be the difference in him winning the regular season championship or not with his teammate Chase Elliott. Now, on the other aspect, you've got some Cup champions that don't look as peachy. Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott look great. Joe Logano, Kyle Busch, not so much. It's getting a little tight down there, huh?
Certainly. I think if you're Joey Logano, you certainly are. You're sweating. You're not losing your beautifully transplanted hair over it. Don't get me wrong, but you're definitely starting to think, okay, when is this going to come? If you're Kyle Busch, you're balding, and you need to wear a hat anytime you're in public at this point because everything that can go wrong is going wrong for that team. I don't know, and I almost blame myself today because I just mushed him that hard because he had a really good day until he didn't. So, but yeah, it would be very odd because right now, if the playoffs started right now, Joey Logano and Kyle Busch aren't in the playoffs, which if you would have said that to me at the beginning of the year, I certainly wouldn't have had it on my bingo card. That being said, I think I don't know about you, Bob. You can weigh in here quickly, but I'm definitely more worried about Kyle Busch than I am Joey Logano. That seems to be a very safe thing to say, right?
100% for two different reasons, and I'm with you, Ad, because you look at the actual playoff bubble itself, and Joey Logano's only 6 points out right now. He's only 6 points out of Bubba Wallace, and then he's 33 behind Chris Buescher. The last two spots are still very attainable. Then it gets a little weird with Alex Bowman. He's 66 above the good, so he's in a good spot right now. But for Joe Logano, he's still got a couple spots that are okay. Now, as that playoff cut line gets tighter and tighter, and the more winners happen, because it's still going to happen, you're going to have more winners. That's when it gets a little sweaty. But for Logano, there's a lot of tracks that are still coming up. Atlanta, Daytona, the short tracks are still okay. I'm not as worried about Joe Logano as Kyle Busch, who, you look at the last three races we said he's got a top 10 car at Gateway, at Sonoma, and today at Iowa he did too. And what did he have in all three of those races? Issues that mired him, self-sustained issues, race issues, mechanical issues, whatever happens. Days that you cannot have when you've circled and said, okay, we have to get something out of these days. This is when we know we're going to be good. RCR just hasn't had that consistency this year. And for Kyle Busch to be 31 points now under the cut line with another DNF today, I mean, yes, maybe he will just magically win his way in, but right now, I just don't see the consistency from RCR to think that they can win right now.
No, and I agree with you, and I would even take it a step further because if Kyle Busch misses the playoffs, I don't know what this does with that relationship between Kyle Busch and RCR because I don't think he would take too kindly to it, especially given some of the ways that he has lost races this year. So I don't know. You don't want to put all this pressure on 1 year, especially in a multi-year relationship. But I'll tell you this much: I would love to be a fly on the wall for a meeting between Kyle Busch and Richard Childress if he doesn't make the playoffs this year, because I think both sides will have a righteous gripe and both sides will have very valid things to say to one another in the meeting. I just don't know if either of them are willing to compromise enough to kind of make this relationship work long term. Let's just say it's the old adage, you'll hear it a million times, winning fixes everything. So if Kyle Busch goes out and gets a win, we don't even talk about this anymore. But every week, as this continues to build and build and build, the drama gets more and more tense, and you have to think that both sides are starting to kind of get their ammunition ready for the divorce proceedings, we'll call it.
Well, it's also weird that you hear Kyle Busch say, I'm more concerned about my win streak. I've won every single season since going back to X year. I've won every year, and I'm more worried about that than the playoffs right now. Obviously, one's going to happen with the other, but it's just weird to hear him talk like that, where the win is more important than the points right now. But, the other thing, Ad, is that, you've heard, especially the last week or so, kind of around the Truex retirement, but still with the silly season rumors and all that, just a lot of smoke about Kyle Busch wanting out of RCR, but that's a 2-year deal. So it sounds like they're already locked in together. And with the climate of silly season right now, with four charters on the open market right now with Stewart Haas, all these driver seats are already open. There's a lot of uncertainty. It almost feels like there's nowhere for Kyle Busch to go but back to RCR. So it feels like that's an arranged marriage for next year in 2025, whether they like it or not. And as inconsistent as they are, they've shown that they can win. Multiple wins last year with Tyler Reddick in 2022. I think 3 wins out of that 8 teams. So it's not like they can't win, but just when things are going negative right now, Kyle Busch is his worst enemy, and RCR just is not a good place right now for whatever reason. I just don't know what's the issue, but it just doesn't seem like there's a quick fix.
No, I agree with you 100%. And Bob, you ready? I'm gonna put your tinfoil hat on, and we may as well get electrocuted. So this is gonna be a fun one. So stick with me here, okay? All right. So let's just say Kyle Busch is very frustrated at the end of the year, and there's a lot of charters for sale. There's one floating around. What is stopping Kyle Busch who's made a lot of money in his NASCAR career from finding a business partner somewhere, someone who's interested in getting in the sport, buying a charter, buying his way out of his RCR contract, which I'm sure would take a pretty penny, probably have to give the Rolex back to say the least. But sets him up, they own one car, he races it for a few years until suddenly there's, I don't know, is there another person in the Busch family who races? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've
there
heard.
might be.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's, maybe he's a Cup prospect. I'm not sure. It's just one of those things. But maybe he just sits in the seat for long enough, hangs out, keeps driving, keeps the sponsorship money there. Next thing you know, Brexton's got a Cup ride. I don't know. Is it a tinfoil hat move? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this is going to happen in the slightest. But how interesting would it be, the silliest of silly seasons, to have Kyle Busch somehow backdoor his way out of this contract and get himself a charter? It would be interesting. We know the former JGR drivers like to own Cup teams. I mean, let's just say what it is. Hi, Denny Hamlin. I'm just going to put the tinfoil hat on, run out in the lightning storm, and yeah, I'll probably get shocked. But it was a genuine thought that popped into my head as you were talking there.
Well, I'm glad that we at least turned the microwave off before we put the tinfoil hat on there. It's an interesting thought, though. I do like it. To buy a charter for your son to race him. What is this, F1? Come on now. Come on. Get out of here. This is not what we do over here in NASCAR. But no, it's definitely an interesting thought. What if, though, with the unrest that is with Kyle Busch, and like you said, Ad, for every week that it keeps going, at some point, we're going to hit a breaking point. We're going to hit a breaking point. I'm with you.
He's owned a race team before. That's all I'm going to put out there. He's owned a race team before. There you go.
Yeah, that race shop is now being hosted by Spire's Truck Team. So maybe he can rent out a Cup Series ride for next year through Spire. Maybe he'll be in the 71. Kyle Busch in the 71 for Spire Motorsports. There you go. I'm sorry. I think McDowell's in the 71. Maybe the 77. He can bump host of or maybe LaJoy. Maybe in the 7. Kyle Busch in the 7 for LaJoy. There you go. We'll make it work somewhere. We'll make it work. There's a lot of pieces to fit. But look, we're over 40 minutes in here. If you've made it this far, again, we appreciate you listening. 87 episodes in, Ad. We are through the cornfields of Iowa, and we only made one pun, 2 references to corn, counting the last one I just did. So that's not too bad. Is there anything that we missed here? Anything else for Father's Day that you want to go ahead and get off your chest here?
No, because all of them are corn puns, and I think we've done a really good job at avoiding it to this point. So I'm just going to shut my mouth.
I appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much. If you've, again, made it this far, go ahead and like and subscribe Breaking Balls. We're always putting out content. We'll have stuff coming out through the week as the news and rumor mill churns out more content for us. But we'll be back with always for that and all the rest here in the NASCAR world. For Adam and Bob, it's Breaking Balls episode 87. Ad, take us home.
Is this heaven? No, it was Iowa.